Well, welcome back to Down the Road Studios here at the Scott Learning Center. I'm the host, Jay Mahaffey, of our podcast here around the Learning Center. And I got a couple of guests with me today. They're in Scott from a long, long way. Y'all introduce yourselves to the world, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. No, Scott Stanislav here. I'm a technical agronomist for Bayer, cover the southern part of Texas. So it's always good to be here in Scott. Prior to being in Texas, I actually worked in the North Delta. So spent a lot of time a few years ago down here. So I always enjoy coming down here and seeing you, Jay.
Yeah, Corey Thompson, another technical agronomist out in West Texas. I always like coming out here. They got these things called trees that we're not privy to.
Yeah. Always, I forget how green it is over here.
Oh, it's beautiful.
This time of the year, this Delta is a pretty place, especially when we got a crop like we got growing now.
Absolutely. Looks good coming
and
in.
It looks good. We got beautiful crops in the field. Now, by the 1st of September, everybody will be tired. The crops will be tired. It'll be so hot for so long. It's time for it to be over.
That's
but
right.
I'm glad to have y'all today. I will confess this. It's rare that I get a group of cotton people in a room together. And that's a great thing. That's
Yes,
a great
it is.
thing.
Oh, yeah. Now we go, not to tell stories, but Jay, we kind of go way back. Even when I was in college, just how it all worked out with me coming and working for the company and whatnot. And some of the early on conversations I had with you when I was in grad school. So
yeah, I think one of your first Monsanto conversations was probably with me in a phone interview.
It was. And it had to do with box mapping of cotton.
That's box mapping. We got to mention mapping at some
point. That's right.
The first thing we got to do when we start talking about mapping is we got to accumulate yield. And I think that's what we're here to talk about today mostly is what are the critical steps and phases that your cotton in Texas. I know y'all have cotton that ranges all the way from probably starting PGRs to the valley's got to be getting into defoliation.
About starting to defoliate down the Rio Grande Valley, yep.
I think I saw somebody the other day that had ginned the bale down there, didn't they? Or picked the bale?
Yeah, that first bale deal down there. I guess that would have been back, a month ago already.
It's usually about the 4th of July.
Yeah, it's late June, So
we thought we'd get together today. We're in Scott doing some training of a big group of folks, and we slipped off today to talk about cotton PGRs early in the season, knowing that that's not appropriate for everybody. We've got all sorts of stages of cotton that are present across the cotton belt, from ready to defoliate in the valley to just getting up and growing good, actually. So I guess our first topic of the day is actually, what about this early PGR use in y'all's environment?
I highly, highly suggest it. Just sets that plan up for success later. Really just kind of, what we were talking about earlier, just trying to get that concentration in the plant. That way you got a little bit working. That way later on in the season, if you got to come back and put the hammer down, it's a lot easier to control.
Yeah, as I think about it, just from my experiences working in the cotton industry, working in the North Delta early on in my career and that cotton production environment up there, a lot of people start pretty early, pretty aggressive. Makes sense. Season length, whatnot on the northern end of the cotton belt, and then move back to Texas, working with the company. Grew up in Texas and getting in an area where season length is really not a limiting factor. We're probably 90% dry land cotton production in the area that I cover of southern Texas, and it was a different perspective from a grower's sense or call it a manager's sense in that environment down there when it comes to PGR use. And a lot of times people are hesitant to start early with PGRs, and just so it was it kind of opened my eyes a little bit. So
it's interesting to me. I've been lucky enough to try to help grow cotton all over the U.S. and really all over the world. It's interesting to me that we all, I say all, most, use and view PGRs as a way to manage risk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what you just said is you look at the far northern environment, we use it to manage earliness to head off the fact that we don't have the late season opportunity. You run out of heat and cotton, you're out of business.
You're out of business.
You take the other view of that, we're using it to manage risk in other places too. Take the Delta, for instance. we know that management of plant height helps us manage boll rot, foliar diseases, earliness too, for us. I mean, earliness is a good idea for everybody.
Yep.
But it seems to me like the exception has always been that far western rain-fed environment.
Yep.
And I tell a lot of people, we say we farm dry land in Mississippi. Now, we farm rain-fed. Dry land is somewhere from central Texas west, generally speaking.
Yes.
And the risk associated with that is a different risk that I think has been under revision in modern times for a lot of reasons. Genetics have changed. These are not the varieties we used to grow, but we still grow them in those stressful, somewhat riskier environments. And the point of our conversation today, I think, y'all tell me, is how do we fit that in? How do we fit an optimized management plan into that environment?
Absolutely.
Because that's not something that somebody around the Mid-South typically deals with very much. Yeah, we do it. We think we do it because we'll have a dry land field or a rain-fed field. It's not a non-irrigated field. That's a better way to say that. And we typically take it easier with our management for all the same reasons. Although those reasons may be a little exacerbated, the further you go toward that stressful environment.
And like from my region of Texas down there, it's kind of what Corey said earlier for out in West Texas. I'm a proponent to do something early on. Like you just mentioned, you don't have to, we're not trying to be super aggressive, but do something early on because that does help you build that concentration in the plant. That does help you just manage through if we do get to a point where we start catching, like we did this year, a lot of late rains and whatnot. And so then we run into those problems that we can't get in the field and we can get out of control with it.
Yeah. And there are two, there are two scientific, I suppose, biological facts that lead into this. And we're not trying to tell anybody to be super aggressive and ignore the environment. That's not how you manage cotton. If you think about what PGRs are, number one, they're growth regulators. Regulator being the pivotal word. They're not shrinkers. And if you have too much plant, you're going to have too much plant when it's over.
Correct.
And the couple of things that go into that equation are, and I say this just for information for the audience. Number one, PGRs or mepiquat, which is the active part of that molecule. Mepiquat is at least the effect and likely the AI is long lasting in the plant. So if I put some on there early, it's in there later. The other part of that really enables this whole system is that it's active at a dry weight concentration, which is a fancy way of saying the bigger plant you got, the more you got to put on to get to get the activity. Well, if I put some on that's accumulated early, even in cases where I may not get growth control out of those lower rates and may not need growth control, it's in there later and it helps me get back above that critical dose when it rains or when I get in a position of having excess growth later over in the year.
Exactly.
That's the point of this.
Exactly.
Now, the question is, how do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've been thinking about these last couple of years, last year we had a pretty decent dry land crop. The 30 years prior to that, I mean, there was one year we had almost an 80-90% abandonment rate. Those same years, though, we had the early rains. We built a beautiful plant, but that's all it was. So, had we been a little bit more proactive and had some PGR go out at that, pinhead to match that square time frame, could we have managed some of that growth and, had that potential to actually make some fruit?
Yeah, redirect that energy into some fruit.
Yeah.
And that's a fine line to ride in that environment.
It is.
But the question comes down to, or where is the risk? And that's a personal decision everybody has to make every field. So, yeah, I mean, the couple of things I would like to point out, though, to the audience is, number one, these are not the same varieties.
Nope.
No, and not even close. And I know y'all grow somewhat different set of genetics and varieties and things, but you still have a sprinkling of the stuff that is around the rest of the cotton belt.
Absolutely.
But generally across the lineup, these things are less determinate or more indeterminate than they've been in history.
I would completely agree. I think that's where, not to go back and telling stories in history and things like that, but we think
That's
about
what this is about.
yeah,
Tell us a
I'm
story
trying
in the
to
history.
just trying to manage you over there, Jay, just so we don't get off too deep over here. But no,
Cotton people are sentimental. We want to hear it all.
That's right, philosophical. No, just thinking about the inception of Mepiquat and when it first was introduced into the market, and like you just mentioned, the varieties. Number one, the cost at that point. Number two, the varieties were completely different, and just due to all those other insect pressures, not having boll guard,
Boll weevils
still at the time, all those things. So just thinking through that time and now how we've eliminated a lot of those stresses, that changes the way we has managed our cotton over those, if you think back that many years.
Absolutely. I think that history is worth a little revisit too. If you think about it, Mepiquat pigs, depending on what source you find, was introduced to 1980, 81 in that time frame. Number one, that was a very hot, dry season. Everybody talks about 1980. I don't hardly remember it. I was 9 or 10, but everybody remembers it. Well, I think one of the seriously missing pieces at that time, and it wasn't anybody's fault, is we didn't know what we were doing with it.
I would agree.
It was a new product. It was a new concept, for that matter. And we had the thing I like. Hindsight's 20/20. But if you look at the varieties that were grown then, it was things like 90, which is a very indeterminate set of genetics. There were other competitive things that stood to benefit greatly from PGRs, but we didn't have the information to use them the most appropriate way. And what that led us to was some overuse. Not anybody, nobody did anything wrong. We just didn't quite have it down. And that led us into this low dose multiple thing where we were putting out 2 and 4 ounces, repeatedly. Then we changed genetics from the more indeterminate things into varieties like Delta Pine 20 and 50 and 51, which truly were shorter season, more determinate, and probably could have been injured by PGRs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then times changed again in that we hesitated because of the first experience.
Yep.
We used the lower rates and doses and moved into those more determinate genetics, and they became easier to manage. We were managing for earliness, trying to get out of the weevils and the budworm. Then all this kind of happened as a continuum. We started to eradicate the boll weevil, and we got boll guard. Well, boll guard came along in more indeterminate genetics with typically higher fiber quality, 5415, 5690, and 90 actually. So you gotta understand the actual product and the system that you're working in, because the system, I don't know if it's chicken or egg. The system changed the products or the products changed the system. It's probably some of both.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's interesting. Just like I said, the market that I work, sometimes I get some kickback from folks in regards to, I don't want to stop my cotton if I start too early. I don't want to hurt it. And that's always the conversation that I have with folks from the standpoint of, well, tell me more. Give me more information. Why do you feel that is the case?
And you're asking the right questions.
Yeah.
The purpose of this conversation is not to criticize that. I think it's to encourage that conversation.
Absolutely.
And I think when you look at the varieties and the products and the things that we're managing in the field today, it's different. And everyone that we introduce is different. I mean, what would be the extremes of determinacy in what's the latest and the earliest you'd grow?
We could grow anything from our very earlies, 2012, 2317, all the way up to 2541's latest maturing variety we've currently got.
About 2537.
Oh, we've got a little bit of it out.
Well, that's the range that I'm concerned about, and you got to overlay the environment over the top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of the point of inflection, I think, through this would be, what are you growing to start with? And a good question to consider would be, why are you growing that? Has it been good for you in the past? Does it suit your management style? So then what are we talking about? Are you a high input guy? Do you like a lot of fertilizer? Do you have any irrigation, drip or otherwise? Crop rotation. All of those things play into the system because I view it as a scale of I guess, risk.
Yep.
Because the more indeterminate products you have, the more likely you are to have some drought tolerance. I mean, that's kind of where that plays. Well, you also, in the event it rains, probably have a higher likelihood of excess growth.
Correct.
And that's where all of this conversation has to go, in my view, is how do we interject the right things in the right places? And then you lay over the top of that, am I rotated with corn or peanuts? What's my field history? Do I know this field's always growthy?
Those are all the questions you have to ask when myself or Corey get the phone call from a grower wanting to know how much PGR to put out on a particular variety, right?
Yeah.
That's the question. How much do I put out first application or whatever it might be?
And when do you do that?
Right. And it's okay. Yeah. Tell me more. Like we've just been talking about from rotation, field history, those types of questions. I mean, you need to know all that to be able to understand how that variety is going to work or grow on that particular type of acre.
Yeah, and the encouragement in this conversation would be try to understand that for you individually.
Mhm.
We can't sit in here in the air conditioning and tell you that about every field, but we can consider what you ought to think about.
Yep.
Because it's one of the enabling parts of this cotton production system that exists today, and it's pretty important.
I would agree.
And this year, I feel like it's going to be even more important. We've got a pretty late crop going. We had some late hailstorms come through, cotton get replanted pretty late. So, the earliness factor, managing for that. I mean, big management part of us. I mean, we're stripper cotton. So for harvest efficiencies.
Excess vegetation is a bad
Yes, it is.
bad deal for you. And all of that really has to be considered in the equation. So that's kind of how I present this to growers is think about PGRs today as a tool to help you manage what they manage, and that is the redirection of energy in the plant in the right direction, whatever that may be. In your case, you got in that stripper cotton, you got more worries about excess vegetation than anybody. But it still redirects energy into fruit also, which is that's where the real value is.
Absolutely.
Is making the fruit when you can. And think about the impact that those indeterminate genetics have had. It's driven a place like Oklahoma. Oklahoma's got more cotton in it than several deep southern states now.
Mm-hmm.
And my view is, number one, they're willing to do it, and number two, they got varieties that can tolerate those stresses. And that's an example of what can be done. My point in all this PGR conversation is, can we do it better?
Can we do it better? I know we've talked about this before personally, Jay, but I'm going to pose the question to you right now. Do you think the use of PGRs, how they've been adopted over time, timings, amounts, things like that, have influenced how we select varieties for commercialization?
Indirectly, yes. Now, there's controversy about that. There's
yes.
always controversy about cotton breeding.
Oh, yeah.
But I absolutely. And I've had this conversation repeatedly with my the breeders.
Mm-hmm.
And, the point I arrive at is you need two systems. You need a managed system and an unmanaged system. One allows you to know how the plant grows without PGR. The other allows you to know what the potential is with. And you don't get the best answer without both, in Jay's view.
I would agree with that. We think about a more determinate variety that is responsive, very responsive to PGRs in that process, and did it most likely in some instances got mismanaged for what that truly the genetics of that variety might have been.
Yeah,
and end up not moving it along. So, just deep thoughts here today.
Well, you gotta think. You gotta remember one of my founding principles. If it's easy, it wouldn't be cotton.
That's correct.
It's not that simple.
That's correct.
And we don't mean to lead anybody to the direction of it being that simple. We want to think about the right parameters, because that's kind of a good segue into something I wanted to mention. We have a lot of data from the Learning Center about cotton variety responses. And it's very easy to look at that or look at me and say, yeah, and that's in Scott on the bank of Deer Creek.
Yep.
Well, it's all relative. And what we would typically do here is we will take a group of varieties, we'll put those into a trial, and we typically will have either 2 or 3 treatments. We'll have an aggressively managed system, which is as aggressive as you can be on the label with Mepiquat. And we'll have an untreated check, which are those 2 systems I was talking about. Some years, if we have plot space, I'll have a passively managed system, which is kind of in the middle. It'll start a little later with a little lower rate. That's the one that hesitates. And oddly, most years, that's the one that will be the highest yielding.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still appropriate in many cases to be more aggressive than that. You just have to look at your field and your system and your farm and see, is that enough or not? And that can only be done with qualified advisors and good information. Because over time, we've accumulated a body of that work. You know, on these podcasts, I always like to talk a little bit about our Learning Center data. We did an analysis in 2021 or 2. I called it meta-analysis. And what I basically did was I took all the PGR data we've ever generated about varietal responses, and I lumped them into 4 categories. I had them whether they were short or tall in the untreated check without any growth regulator, and I had them whether I reduced their height more or less when I applied the products. Well, we looked at 2 things, height and yield. Guess what the tallest variety in the test without PGRs would be? They're the ones that are the most responsive to pigs because they grow more actively early. They typically boom out of the ground. They're kind of bigger seeded most of the time. But once I applied PGRs to them, they're easier to control because they're more responsive. Well, the less responsive is everything else, like 2537, 1646, all that stuff. Well, guess what we grow today? Mostly.
Oh, yep.
That stuff that's less responsive is typically a little more, it's not as responsive to the PGR, so it winds up being a little tougher. I guess that'd be the word. Typically, that's associated with drought and stress tolerances. But the real point of that data when I got to the end of it is, if I had a variety that was sensitive to PGR, and I got an extra inch of growth in that variety, that extra inch of growth penalized me about 17 pounds of lint an acre. However, if I have a variety that's tall and not very responsive to growth regulation, that penalty for that same extra inch of growth is 31 pounds of lint. And it's because you have this compounding effect. It grows too fast, it sheds, you fix it, it settles down, it starts growing again, and it's this treadmill you fight up. So the risk in that kind of variety is about double, close to double. And that's why we're talking about this today. I'm a cotton entomologist by training, and it hurts my pride a little bit to say this, but the PGR in today's world matters more than anything else. Sometimes. We still got to control bugs, I know that.
Oh, yeah.
The PGR and the acknowledgement of the need to do it is very, very important.
Well, that brings up a question, Jay. I know you've done a lot of work with Thrive On, and you've done all this PGR work.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
How do you feel Thrive On has changed your management with PGRs?
Now you get philosophical. I truly don't think it changes the individual tactics much at all. It changes the need for the awareness greatly, or changes the need to scout and be aware of what's happening in the field greatly. And by that, I mean, if you think about a variety like, the perfect example is 2522. It's reniform nematode tolerant. It's Thrive On. What's that going to mean? Now, it's a early mid variety.
Right. Yep.
So by the number,
right.
It's early mid. It's going to come up with very little or no thrips damage. All of a sudden, I've got a handle on reniform nematodes, which a lot of people don't even acknowledge as a problem, even though they're there.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, more of the roots are mine. That cotton's a coil spring, and it's going to be growing when it comes up, particularly in this rain, or irrigated environment. So the implications of Thrive On and these native traits are tremendous for potential and subtle change. How about that? It's just going to make a healthier plant that's growing better. It's going to have its growth habit correct.
Yeah, you minimized all those stressors, and
Yeah, my committee in graduate school's favorite word was multiple stressors.
Yep.
I bet they set it up how many thousands of times. If I finally know what they were talking about.
Yeah, that's right.
But the odd part of that changed too, because they were talking about multiple stressors from the viewpoint of thrips and pre-herbicides. We used to keep this cotton sick for 6 weeks trying to
Forever.
keep the weeds beat out of it.
Yep.
And we still put some pre's out, and we still get some phyto from them, but it's not like it was.
No.
So we've got a healthier system that changed. And that's the point of all this, is it changed for us over time. And in response to that, we just sometimes need to react differently.
Gotta be agile, no doubt.
Yeah. And that's what makes cotton unique. You think about it, corn blooms once over a week, 10 days. Cotton blooms 100 times in 100 days. You got opportunity to fix stuff that's wrong in a cotton field.
You sure do.
But the point of this conversation is, why let it get out of whack to start with?
Exactly.
Sometimes you have to hedge based on rainfall or,
Right.
stresses and stuff. But
there's a lot of things as a cotton grower that you can't manage, or you have no influence on, but you can influence it.
And you shouldn't over-influence it.
And you shouldn't
You should appropriately influence.
That's a good way to put it. Appropriately influence it.
Yeah.
With what you can control.
Well, I would just invite everybody. We talked a little bit about our data from the Learning Center. If we can help you, if I can get you in contact with these guys in the field, call us and let us know. We're happy to have the conversation. We'll try to interpret it into any environment that you deem appropriate. But right now, I think we'll step over to, we've already made a little trip around the cotton fields a little bit, but I'll introduce a new segment today here on the Down the Road podcast called The Cotton Patch. And what that is we're just going to talk a little bit and ramble a little bit about things we might have always been curious about. So I got a question for y'all before we finish. What shape is a cotton square?
it's a triangle.
Does that make sense to anybody?
Not really, right? Never really thought about it. Well,
we have,
but
why?
Why? That's it. Ask the why. Well, why is it?
Yeah, it's called a square, but it's the triangle.
Yeah.
And I acknowledge in this conversation, I can't prove any of this. But I did at some point over the last 18 months, 2 years. I went up on top of the library at Mississippi State and started digging around in the old journals to see if I could find some indication of that. And the best I could do was I took a bunch of the old journals and publications, which I find to be very entertaining anyway, even without a firm destination. I like to go wander around. And I decided I would look up the word square in a journal article or a publication from the university or something. And then I'd track it back through as many of the old publications as I could. And I tracked it backwards until I ran out of the word square. And I found it seemed, and like I said, none of this is firm and never will be firmly proven. It seemed like we transitioned from the word square to this process called squaring off sometime in the late 1800s is where I lost it. And the best I could interpret that to mean is the process of squaring off is about the time folks describe cotton plants as getting shoulders under them. That's what the Delta folks say. I don't know what they say in Texas.
Yeah.
Yep.
Got some shoulders.
Yep.
It goes from that puny plant trying to die to a woody plant that wants to live and tries to live.
Yeah, that's going to live forever. Yep.
Well, my contention is that the process of squaring off, getting shoulders about it, coincided with the development of flower buds, and the flower buds, even though they're shaped like triangles, started being called squares.
Makes sense to me.
That makes
That's
sense.
the best explanation I've ever heard of.
Well, if the audience has any better ideas, we'd love to hear them.
You know what else? I've also a lot of customers and whatnot in the past when the cotton's really growing good and put out a application of a PGR that that really takes hold, and guys make the comment about how it squared it off. I don't know. I've heard people say that to me, or I've had people tell me that.
Well, that's the best I can come
Yeah.
up with.
Yeah.
Anyway. Well, I appreciate y'all coming today. Y'all got any closing comments you want to make about PGRs? Call us for more information. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's local work that's done all across the Cotton Belt within Bayer in regards to PGR work and the effect in the environment with the varieties that we deal with. So if there's any questions, in my opinion, reach out to your local folks.
Yeah, and I would say that exactly. I have work here in Scott I'm very excited about. I realize it's one environment. We do this in a lot of other places, and we cooperate and communicate internally, try to develop the best programs we can for all areas. So if we can help you in any way, give us a call. We're very happy to hear from all our customers, audiences. If you have a topic or something you'd like us to discuss in this format, let us know. And I guess we'll see you down the road. Thanks for coming.